Mr. Little thought a good deal about his own health. He hadn't many other things to think about now. He was 66 and didn't go to work anymore. His wife was dead, and his son and daughter were grown up and out at work all day. In fine weather he spent most of the day in the garden. It was a small garden at the back of the house, and he liked to keep it in good order. He spent a lot of time watering the flowers, turning over the earth, or pulling out the plants that grew in the wrong place. But every afternoon he lay down on his bed for 2 hours.
"At my age,"
he said,
"a man needs plenty of rest. Rest, fresh air, plain food, and a quiet, regular life, those are the things that keep me healthy."
One fine evening Mr. Little was busy watering the flowers. His son Alec and daughter Molly were sitting in the garden having a drink. Suddenly Mr. Little gave a small cry and put his hand to his left side.
"What is it, Father?"
said Molly.
"Have you got a pain?"
"It's my heart,"
he said in a low voice. He left the flowers and sat down very slowly beside Molly.
"It is a bad pain,"
she said.
"It's not a pain exactly. It's a sort of feeling. I had it once yesterday, and I was afraid. But now I know. I have a weak heart."
"Why don't you go to Dr. Benson?"
said Alec.
"He'll tell you if there's anything wrong with your heart."
Mr. Little hardly ever went to see a doctor. He didn't trust doctors. But as the days passed he became quite sure that this heart was in a bad condition, and at last he agreed to visit young Dr. Benson. He came back looking very angry.
"Well, Father, what did he say?"
asked Molly.
"Doctors never tell you the truth,"
said Mr. Little.
"You can't trust them at all. Do you know that young men said there was nothing wrong with my heart?"
"But that's wonderful!"
cried Alec.
I didn't believe him, of course. My heart is in a bad condition, I know. I must live very carefully now.
From this time Mr. Little stopped all his work in the garden. He hardly ever went out of the house.
"You see,"
he said to Alec and Molly,
"something could happen which I wasn't expecting. Even a sudden loud noise may be too much for my heart. I may fall down dead in the street."
Alec and Molly were sad to see the change in their father.
"His garden used to keep him happy,"
said Molly.
"It's bad for him to do nothing all day. And he looks so much older. Perhaps he really has got a weak heart."
"I must have a word with Dr. Benson,"
said Alec. A few days later, he came into the kitchen while his sister was getting supper ready.
"I saw Dr. Benson today,"
he said.
"He told me there is really nothing wrong with Father's heart. There is no doubt about it at all."
"Well, I'm very glad to hear that. But how can we make Father believe it?"
"Leave that to me. I shall find a way."
Mr. Little still had his rest every afternoon. Because he didn't go out in the mornings now, he found it difficult to sleep in the afternoons, but he lay down on his bed even so. One afternoon he was lying there trying to sleep, when he heard a small sound in the sitting room below. There was no one else in the house just then. What could it be? Perhaps the dog from next door had got in. Perhaps it had jumped onto the table. Mr. Little got up and went slowly down to the hall. On the bottom step he stopped. Through the open sitting room door he caught sight of something moving, something large and dark. That wasn't a dog. It was a man in dark clothes, standing by the side table, and he had something bright in his hand. The silver. He was taking the silver. For a moment Mr. Little stood quite still on the bottom step. His heart was beating loudly, but he had forgotten all about his heart and its bad condition. Suddenly he ran forward, picked up a chair and lifted it into the air. The thief did not wait for the chair to come down on his head. In 2 seconds he had jumped through the window and was running across the back garden. Mr. Little looking after him in surprise. What had happened to the man's face? He seemed to have no eyes, no mouth, hardly any nose. Then he understood. The man had pulled a woman's stocking over his head. Mr. Little couldn't get through the window. He ran to the front door and round to the back garden. But there was no sign of the thief anywhere, and he hurried inside again to see what had been taken. The drawers of the side table were wide open, but they were still full of silver things. Looking quickly through them, Mr. Little couldn't find anything missing.
I suppose when he saw me he was afraid and dropped the things,
he thought. It was only at this moment that Mr. Little remembered his weak heart.
Dear me! How terrible!
He said, and sat down suddenly.
What have I done? My heart will never stand a thing like this.
He sat quite still for about 15 minutes. His heart went on beating as usual.
Well, it's a strange thing,
he said to himself.
But I feel quite well. Better than usual, in fact. I wonder if Dr. Benson can be right after all.
When Molly and Alec came home that evening, their father was watering the garden.
"Oh, Father,"
said Molly.
"are you feeling better?"
Well, my dear, I think a man who has driven away a thief from his house in the afternoon can safely water the flowers in the evening.
"What? A thief? Do you really mean it? Oh, tell us about it quickly."
Mr. Little told them the whole story of the faceless thief. It was a good story, he thought. At the end of it, Alec took his father's hand.
Father, you're wonderful! And your heart must be as strong as mine. No man with a weak heart could do what you've done today.
Well, I really think you may be right,
said Mr. Little.
"Why didn't you tell the police?"
said Molly.
"Perhaps they could catch the thief."
Dear me, I never thought of it. Shall I telephone them now?
Oh, it's much too late,
said Alec quickly.
They won't catch him now.
Well,
said his father,
I hope they won't catch him. That thief has been a good friend to me. No, I shall not tell the police.
He got up and returned to his flowers. Later that evening Alec came into his sister's room.
I have something to give back to you,
he said.
I took it from your drawer this morning.
He held up a stocking.
Oh, Alec! You were the faceless thief.
I was. But I shan't do anything like that again. I think it's bad for my heart.